There's an old saying that money is the root of all evil. For centuries, this idea has echoed through religions, philosophies, and everyday conversations, shaping how we view wealth, happiness, and morality. Yet, like many absolute claims, it falls apart when faced with the complexities of human nature. The connection between money and happiness isn't straightforward, nor can it be boiled down to simple slogans. Money itself holds no inherent morality. It's a tool, a means, a possibility. What truly shapes its effect on our lives is how we use it, the intentions behind it, and our understanding of what it means to live well. On one side, severe poverty can trap a person in humiliation, despair, and a constant fight for survival, leaving little room for genuine happiness. On the other, unchecked wealth without wisdom often corrodes relationships, fuels vanity, breeds suspicion, and distances us from the simple essentials of true contentment. Both extreme lack and excessive abundance carry risks of corruption, not only of social values but of the human spirit itself. There are those who even in poverty cultivate generosity and nobility, and there are those who surrounded by opulence lose themselves in vice and arrogance. Likewise, there are people who despite having little live tormented by comparison and resentment, while others owners of vast fortunes manage to maintain gratitude and serenity. Happiness, therefore, is not an automatic byproduct of a bank account. It depends on the wisdom with which we relate both to what we have and to what we desire. It is within this complex space that the real question arises. Can money actually buy happiness? Not as a magic number that solves all problems, but as a tool that when used consciously can indeed open pathways to a freer, more meaningful life, rich in authentic joys. To understand how this is possible, we must look more closely at the diversity of human experiences regarding money and the choices that silently shape the kind of happiness each person is capable of reaching. Human diversity becomes particularly vivid in how each individual relates to money. While some manage to find satisfaction in a simple life, others seem trapped in an endless pursuit, as if no amount could ever fill the void they carry inside. For some, a small house, a modest table, and the warmth of a quiet afternoon are enough to make life worthwhile. For others, not even the most luxurious mansions, the most expensive cars, or the most exclusive trips are enough to silence their internal restlessness. This difference arises not just from external conditions, but from the way each person interprets their needs and aspirations. Money is without a doubt essential in modern life. It ensures food, shelter, health, and access to a range of resources that enhance quality of life. However, its presence or absence takes on very different meanings depending on each individual's beliefs, values, and life experiences. Some have little and yet cultivate a deep sense of gratitude. Others, even surrounded by abundance, live tormented by fear, envy, or a persistent sense of insufficiency. It is not money itself that shapes these emotions. It's what it symbolizes to each person. For some, it is security. For others, status. For others, still, it is freedom. And there are those for whom money becomes a silent burden, a constant source of worries and conflicts. Science and philosophy, each in their own way, have long pointed out that the real difference does not lie in the amount accumulated, but in how the human mind processes the relationship between possessions and well-being. This leads us to a fundamental realization. Money can be an ally or a tyrant, a gateway to joy or a golden prison. And to understand the delicacy of this relationship, it's necessary to recognize that happiness and money do not always walk hand in hand. The connection between them is more subtle, more dependent on the quality of consciousness than on the quantity of fortune. This is why so many rich people feel miserable and so many humble individuals radiate genuine contentment. What's at stake is not just having, but being. How we live with what we possess. Understanding this difference is the first step toward using money wisely, building a kind of happiness that does not depend merely on accumulation, but on wisdom in its use and appreciation of what truly matters. This perception inevitably leads us to an uncomfortable reality for those who believe that accumulating would be enough. Money and happiness do not share a direct automatic relationship. Human history is filled with examples of individuals who, after amassing immense wealth, found themselves submerged in loneliness, anxiety, and an almost inexplicable sense of emptiness. In such cases, money reveals its ambiguous nature. It can ease practical suffering, but it is far from filling the existential void of the soul. Since antiquity, thinkers like Epicurus and centuries later, Schopenhauer warned that the reckless pursuit of material goods could be an illusory path. Epicurus, for example, did not deny the importance of meeting basic needs, but taught that lasting happiness came from another source, cultivating simple pleasures, consciously limiting desires, and nurturing inner freedom. Schopenhauer, for his part, observed that human desire is insatiable by nature, and that most of the time, what causes suffering is not objective lack, but the constant feeling that something is still missing. Modern science confirms in new words what these ancient masters had already intuited. Numerous studies show that after reaching a certain income level, enough to meet basic needs and ensure a comfortable life, the increase in money results in only marginal gains in happiness. It's not that money becomes irrelevant, but its power to transform emotional quality of life decreases drastically. From that point on, what matters is not how much we have, but how we live, what we value, and how we integrate our possessions into the meaning we give to existence. This revelation is both liberating and demanding. It frees those who believe they had to be millionaires to be happy, but it also requires maturity to avoid falling into the trap of replacing authentic dreams with manufactured desires. Money can be an excellent servant, but it is a terrible master. When seen merely as a means in service of something greater, free time, personal growth, creative freedom, human connection, it becomes a powerful tool for a richer life. When treated as an end in itself, it inevitably leads to disappointment. This awareness opens the door to an even more important question. If money alone does not guarantee happiness, how can it be used in a way that truly fosters it? The answer lies not only in how much we spend, but above all in how we invest our emotional and material resources, and in recognizing that not every purchase carries the same weight in building our true joy. Learning how to spend wisely is perhaps one of the most underrated arts of modern life. Not every purchase, even those made with great enthusiasm, brings happiness proportional to its cost. Sometimes objects that were eagerly desired are forgotten within weeks, while simpler acquisitions continue to bring small moments of satisfaction for years. The most common mistake is not in buying itself, but in confusing what can nourish genuine happiness with what merely anesthetizes temporary discomfort. How often do people turn to consumption to answer voids that money is inevitably incapable of filling? Many times we buy status, acceptance, and image, not a true experience of joy. Disproportionate acquisitions driven by social or emotional impulses often bring more stress than pleasure, unnecessary debts, worries about maintenance, fear of loss or theft. All of this undermines the freedom that should be the sweetest fruit of the conscious use of money. Here, Epicurus's philosophy emerges as a guiding light. The Greek philosopher, keenly aware of the restless nature of human desires, proposed a fundamental distinction. There are natural desires like hunger, thirst and shelter, and vain desires, artificial creations fueled by culture, pride, and social comparison, such as the desire for power, glory, and unlimited wealth. This classification is strikingly relevant today. Many goods sold as essential for happiness belong to the realm of vain desires. Luxury cars, flashy brands, cutting-edge technologies that become obsolete in months. All these items feed needs that do not arise from the soul, but from the silent pressure of the social environment. These are desires that, instead of liberating, enslave, keeping individuals running after new conquests that, once achieved, quickly lose their ability to enchant. Thus, understanding this dynamic is crucial. Buying what truly meets real needs, comfort, security, health, genuine leisure is about building a solid foundation for a satisfying life. Investing resources in artificial desires risks entering an endless cycle of dissatisfaction. Epicurus teaches us that happiness does not depend on the quantity of things we accumulate, but on the quality of our desires and the wisdom with which we choose them. When truly integrated, this awareness does not lead to greed, but to freedom. By learning to differentiate what we genuinely need from what we were merely led to want, we use money as an instrument of well-being, not as a continuous source of anxiety. This is the beginning of a deeper journey, recognizing that the true enemy of happiness is not the lack of money itself, but chronic dissatisfaction fueled by desires that can never be fully satisfied. The trap of vain desires runs deeper than it seems. They not only promise a happiness they fail to deliver, but also instill a permanent state of restlessness. The more they are satisfied, the more new desires arise in an endless sequence that robs individuals of any lasting sense of serenity. What should be an achievement becomes a burden. The pleasure of possession is quickly corroded by the fear of loss, the anxiety of preservation, and the incessant comparison with what has yet to be acquired. Desire, when aimed at the superfluous, creates an insatiable thirst, a new luxury item, a higher social status, a more exclusive experience. Each conquest brings with it the shadow of its own insufficiency. Expectations rise, comparisons intensify, and with that pleasure fades, leaving behind a trail of frustration that demands new acquisitions to be silenced. Thus, life becomes a race with no finish line, where happiness is always one step ahead, unreachable. This dynamic not only undermines individual satisfaction, but also generates a considerable psychological cost. Maintaining a lifestyle based on fabricated desires demands constant energy, time, and attention. There's the financial stress of sustaining high standards, the fear of losing ground, the tension of remaining visible and desirable in a competitive landscape. What once seemed like innocent consumption reveals its bitter face, emotional enslavement. Moreover, fabricated desires make individuals vulnerable to external manipulations. Advertising, social media, and trend cycles all conspire to reinforce the feeling that something is missing, that more must be acquired to be complete, accepted, and respected. This perpetuated dissatisfaction becomes, in the words of some modern philosophers, a subtle form of domination. While individuals are busy chasing imposed desires, they lose sight of their own autonomy, their ability to define what is sufficient and essential for their lives. Recognizing this logic does not mean condemning all desire or all forms of consumption, but understanding that when desire is not moderated by consciousness, it becomes a continuous source of disturbance. Happiness does not lie in the infinite multiplication of satisfactions, but in the ability to find fullness in what is simple and true. It is precisely this direction that Epicurus points us toward, not to eliminate all desires, but to learn to distinguish between those that liberate and those that enslave. This distinction invites us to an even more important inner movement, to consciously limit our desires so that they serve life and not the other way around. Consciously limiting one's desires was for Epicurus one of the keys to a happy life. True happiness, he taught, was not found in an abundance of possessions, but in the ability to find contentment in satisfying the most basic needs. Eating when hungry, drinking when thirsty, resting when the body needs it. In these natural and easily satisfied needs lies a kind of serene pleasure, free from the disturbances that accompany excess and unbridled ambition. This view is corroborated by modern research, such as the famous Harvard study of adult development, which has tracked the lives of individuals for more than 80 years. The findings indicate that small recurring pleasures like spending time with others, walking outdoors, and engaging in unhurried activities produce more happiness over time than isolated major achievements. A large purchase may generate a brief surge of euphoria, but it is in the rhythm of small moments of pleasure and gratitude that life finds its deepest and most satisfying rhythm. Epicurus understood that the excess of desires, especially artificial ones, was an endless source of suffering. A simple life, far from being a bitter renunciation, was for him the highest form of freedom. Freedom from fear, from anguish, and from emotional enslavement to the superfluous. This conscious choice to limit desires and ignore the temptations imposed by society allowed the wise person not only to survive, but to flourish under any external condition. Happiness, therefore, would not be a prize reserved for the wealthy, but a state achievable by anyone who cultivated the wisdom to want little and value much. However, this philosophy clashes with the practical reality most people face: the need to work to survive. Money, while no guarantee of happiness, is a concrete necessity in modern society. It pays for food, housing, healthcare, and education. Working to earn it is, for the vast majority, an unavoidable obligation. And it is in this relationship between work, money, and freedom that many find both their stability and their anguish. For some, work is a source of personal fulfillment, a space where talents are exercised and dreams take shape. For others, it is a cold exchange of time and energy for survival, marked by exhaustion, alienation, and the feeling of selling pieces of one's own life. When work is merely a means of subsistence, disconnected from individual values and passions, it becomes heavy and exhausting, draining not only physical vitality, but also the ability to find pleasure in small things. The absolute dependence on work to maintain a standard of living, often artificially elevated by vain desires, traps individuals in a never-ending race. Endless hours are traded for goods that soon lose their shine. Thus, what should be a tool for freedom paradoxically becomes a new form of servitude. The trade of time, the most valuable resource for goods that do not nourish the soul, is a silent tragedy of the modern world. Understanding this dynamic is crucial for anyone who wants to use money as a means of building true happiness. Working to meet basic needs and ensure freedom of choice is healthy and necessary. Working to feed insatiable desires is a way of perpetuating unhappiness. The challenge, therefore, is not just to earn money, but to learn how to use it wisely, to buy not merely things but above all time. Time to live, to think, to feel, and to be. This awareness of the importance of time naturally leads us to another fundamental distinction made by Schopenhauer: the difference between lower and higher pleasures. While sensory pleasures such as the possession of material goods, good food, or physical comfort are momentary and fleeting, higher pleasures, such as the contemplation of art, the cultivation of philosophy, and the appreciation of nature, is beauty, offer a deeper and more lasting satisfaction, tied to the expansion of consciousness and the enrichment of the spirit. For Schopenhauer, the value of a life is not measured by the quantity of goods accumulated, but by the quality of the inner experiences it enables. A man rich within himself can find happiness in a painting, a book, a symphony, or even in the silent depth of reflection. These pleasures require little money but much sensitivity and time, and it is precisely here that the contradiction of modern society becomes evident. Never before have we had so much access to instruments of culture, art, and knowledge. And yet never before have we had so little time and willingness to truly enjoy them. True luxury, therefore, is not having many things, but having the freedom to dedicate time to activities that nourish the soul. Time to read, to create, to think without haste. Time to be present with loved ones without the constant anxiety of pending tasks. Time to dive deep into oneself and the mystery of existence. This kind of freedom is not sold in stores or displayed in shop windows. It must be conquered, often against the demands of relentless consumption and productivity. Schopenhauer saw the possession of free time as the true sign of inner wealth. A man who must work incessantly to maintain external luxuries may be poorer in a profound sense than one who, with little lives, serenely cultivating pleasures that do not depend on the applause or envy of others. The freedom to organize one's own time to choose how to spend the hours of the day is a form of wealth that does not deteriorate, but rather grows as one matures internally. This vision invites us to rethink the traditional logic that links happiness to the accumulation of goods. Perhaps what we truly seek, even if often unconsciously, is the freedom to be who we are, to live our own way without the constant need to justify our existence through possessions or appearances. And in this sense, money can indeed be an ally if we know how to use it, not to fill our lives with objects, but to empty them of the excess that prevents us from feeling, thinking, and being authentically. This realization opens space for a new strategy, using money not merely to acquire things, but to purchase what we most deeply desire: free time to live fully and consciously. The idea of buying time instead of goods may be one of the most intelligent ways to use money in the pursuit of happiness. Recent research shows that people who use their resources to delegate undesirable tasks, such as hiring cleaning services ordering ready-made meals or paying for small conveniences that save precious hours, report higher levels of life satisfaction than those who invest in material acquisitions. It's not hard to understand why. The time that is freed can be used for meaningful activities, true relationships, and inner cultivation. While objects, after the initial excitement, simply become part of the emotional furniture of routine, buying time is therefore a way to reclaim ownership of one's own life. An act of wisdom in a world that constantly tries to convince us that success means always being busy. More than accumulating, it's about creating space. Space to breathe, to think, to reconnect with what truly matters. Every hour of free time gained is not just a relief from the rush. It is a silent investment in the quality of existence. This perspective brings us closer to the importance of frugality and financial freedom. Living frugally doesn't mean living in scarcity or deprivation, but making conscious choices about where and how money will be used. It means placing greater value on emotional security than on the shine of appearances. Instead of continuously raising one's standard of consumption with every increase in income, frugality suggests maintaining simplicity in order to gain autonomy. The goal is not to accumulate for the sake of accumulating, but to build a reserve that protects against the unexpected and above allows for freer choices. Schopenhauer had already warned that money, when used to stimulate increasingly extravagant desires, becomes a source of dependency and suffering. But when used as protection against need, it becomes an invisible shield that allows individuals to resist the temptation of compromising their lives and dignity in degrading exchanges. Financial freedom is at its core the ability to say no. No to corrupting jobs, no to exploitative relationships, no to lifestyles that enslave. And in this pursuit of a freer life, it becomes essential to rethink how we spend. Studies consistently show that spending money on experiences provides more lasting happiness than investing in material things. The reason is simple. Experiences like travel, social gatherings, and unique moments enrich our memory, strengthen relationships, and become part of our life story. Objects, no matter how desirable they are at first, tend to quickly lose their appeal, victims of hedonic adaptation, the process by which the pleasure from a new acquisition fades over time. Moreover, material possessions encourage constant social comparison. A new car may bring joy at first, but it's soon compared to newer models, diminishing the initial satisfaction. Experiences, on the other hand, are subjective, unique, and difficult to compare. A trip, a concert, an unforgettable afternoon with friends. These moments resist the cold logic of comparison because they carry personal meaning that cannot be measured in numbers. Understanding this difference is key for those who want to turn money into a true ally of happiness. By prioritizing experiences over things, we not only accumulate moments of joy, but also build a life richer in meaning, less vulnerable to the traps of envy, comparison, and chronic dissatisfaction. Something curious happens when we invest in experiences. They not only bring pleasure at the moment they occur, but continue to resonate within us long afterward. A memory from a trip, a meaningful conversation, a simple celebration. These fragments of experience intertwine with our memory and, more than that, shape our identity. While material objects wear out and lose importance over time, experiences enrich the fabric of our existence. This difference is crucial. Experiences resist the erosion of habit and the tyranny of comparison because they are unique, unrepeatable, irreplaceable. They don't depend on others' approval and aren't vulnerable to consumer trends. A precious memory of a shared sunset, a challenge overcome, an emotion deeply felt. These remain alive even as the years pass and the objects around us change or disappear. Every meaningful experience becomes a silent investment in lasting happiness. In addition, when we collect experiences instead of possessions, our focus shifts from the external to the internal. We stop measuring life by store windows and begin to measure it by the intensity with which we live our days. This change in perspective is transformative. It breaks the cycle of constant dissatisfaction and reconnects happiness to something that is truly within reach, regardless of external circumstances. At its core, choosing to live experiences instead of accumulating things is also choosing to live with more authenticity and depth. And there is one particular kind of experience that, according to both science and ancient traditions, has the power to exponentially increase happiness: generosity. Giving to others when done freely and consciously not only strengthens social bonds, but also nourishes a sense of purpose, belonging, and inner joy. Giving a gift, supporting a cause, offering help without expecting immediate return. These gestures expand our own sense of abundance. Numerous studies show that people who practice acts of generosity report higher levels of emotional well-being. But it's important to understand that true generosity does not come from obligation or the search for recognition. It arises from a genuine connection to another person's need. It is giving that is chosen, felt, and desired that creates real happiness. When giving becomes a burden or a form of transaction, its power to generate well-being dissipates. Generosity also builds invisible networks of support and affection. In a world where loneliness and individualism are growing at alarming rates, the bonds forged through altruistic gestures become precious sources of emotional security. When we give, often without realizing it, we also receive. We receive gratitude, friendship, and a more luminous reflection of ourselves. The act of giving, therefore, is a way of affirming life, both the life of another and our own. And so, by understanding the value of experiences and generosity, we begin to see more clearly how money, far from being an enemy of happiness, can be a silent ally for a richer, fuller, and deeply human existence. The benefits of generosity go far beyond immediate well-being. When cultivated sincerely, it sows lasting networks of support in the world, strengthening the bonds that sustain social life. Giving to others, whether time, attention, resources, or affection, builds bridges that can withstand the storms of loneliness and adversity. Those who cultivate generosity often plant allies where they least expect, building a community of trust that may prove essential in moments of greatest vulnerability. This network of support is not built solely through grand gestures, but above all through small actions repeated over time: a kind act, a word of encouragement, a quiet helping hand. All these subtle movements reinforce the sense that we are not alone, that we belong to something greater than ourselves. And this feeling of belonging in turn is one of the pillars of lasting happiness. However, it's important to recognize that not everyone experiences the same joy in giving. Personality, life history, and beliefs formed in childhood influence how each person relates to generosity. Some, wounded by past experiences of exploitation or rejection, may feel resistance or fear when it comes to giving. For them, the act of offering must be rebuilt gradually with respect for personal limits and without guilt. True generosity is never born from obligation, but from inner freedom. Still, even for those who struggle at first, small acts of giving can open surprising pathways to emotional healing and the strengthening of self-esteem. Generosity is not only a gift to the one who receives, it also transforms the giver, expanding their capacity to love, to trust, and to recognize their own strength. In this way, as we reflect on this entire journey, it becomes clear that money, far from being an automatic villain, can be a powerful instrument for building happiness when used with wisdom, awareness, and purpose. It can ease suffering, create memorable experiences, free up time, strengthen relationships, and increase one's ability to positively impact the world around them. Yes, money can buy happiness when it is used to fulfill simple and genuine pleasures, when it liberates time instead of imprisoning it, when it is invested in soul-enriching experiences rather than feeding empty comparisons, and when it becomes a means to expand generosity and human connection. The secret is not in the amount, but in the quality of the relationship we cultivate with it. In a world that often pushes us toward excess and dissatisfaction, knowing how to use money as a tool for inner freedom is a revolutionary act. Instead of being slaves to consumption, we can become the architects of a lighter, more authentic, and more meaningful life. There's no need to renounce money or demonize it. We simply need to learn how to use it in service of what we've always longed for deep down: to live with joy, peace, and authenticity. So in answering the question that has guided us to this point, we can say with confidence, money can buy happiness. But only for those who have understood that true happiness is not for sale. It is cultivated step by step, choice by choice, desire by desire.